We are going to talk about innovation and fintech, and I will introduce our panelists on this topic. The first one, he wants to take on big banks. He's the CTO of N26, Pratekur. Next up, she is the CIO of Bank Austria, and her main focus of her work is the development of an integrated IT strategy and various transformation activities. Welcome, Tina Pogacic. And the next one is the CTO of Spotcap, and Spotcap aims to empower small and mid-sized enterprises with tailored finance. Welcome, Piyush Purang. So, and no fintech panel without the hot topic of the day, blockchain. And for this topic here is the CMO of Chainium, Helen. And last but not least, she is the Global Account Director for CA Technologies, Preston. So, Patrick, you want to take on the big banks, is that right? Yeah. So. There's not a lot of money in customer nowadays for banks. So why are you so keen to get them?
We want to change the way that people do retail banking. And I think if anyone understands the sort of digital mobile age today, I think for a lot of the customer experience, that there's a lot of service to be had in modernizing and digitizing a lot of that. I think one of the exciting things that we have is that we have a sort of a lower cost basis, so we don't actually have physical branches in N26, everything is mobile. And that actually means that we can actually make money without a lot of overhead because we can actually automate a lot more processes and we have more modern infrastructure that allows us to deliver services and scale up to the customer base that we have. So to give you an example, I actually just joined N26 in September last year. We had 450,000 users. We already have more than 1 million people. And we still have the same sort of technology base. And that means that we can scale a lot more significantly. And we can offer better value to our customers through this way.
Tina, what do you think? You are from a big bank, Bank Austria.
Sure.
And do you think that banks will get to the point where they are software companies and will kind of have a defense against these newcomers like N26?
I would say that definitely all big banks have the challenge of coping with this type of a fast software development. And not only that banks will become a software company mainly, but we see a huge turnaround in terms of the people and the skills that we are having inside the company. Meaning we are very much focused on building up IT skills to have it inside the company, knowing that inevitably our products are fully digitally or on a digital journey to become.
Hannah, you did a lot of transformation work at big banks, a lot of machine learning, fraud detection, and so on. Do you think that they get to the point where they're software companies in the first way?
So CA Technologies has a suite of tools that accelerate that DevOps process and security and promoting agile transformation. What I've seen in some of the big banks who've tried to achieve that sort of transition from legacy infrastructures and into transforming into a digital software company is that they've set up digital hubs, innovation labs, and it's a bit like putting a new body on an old car. And they haven't really changed the guts of the car, if you like. And also, large organizations, they're sort of hampered by politics and different business units having different goals and business outcomes. I mean, one bank, and they're just a UK-based bank, had 6 different teams of people working on the same deliverable. And, could you imagine if you were designing a car and somebody was designing the bonnet and somebody was designing the the doors and somebody was designing something else, but you're going through the same conveyor belt of development, you know, they just don't tie together nicely. And that's why, you know, lots of the banks have quite disjointed or unpleasant digital experiences. You know, when you're logging into their app, they haven't really sort of come up, you know, they haven't really thought about the journey that somebody's going on. But they definitely are changing. And with the new banks that are coming to the market, like Monzo and Starling and N26, they're seeing what you're doing, and that's raising the bar. And you know, their advantage is they've got a lot of money, so they can make it happen if they want to.
But the advantage is maybe they have a lot of money, and they have also the customers, but they also have a lot of legacy software in the background. How much COBOL is there, for example, still in big banks?
See, yeah, everybody thinks that the mainframe is going to disappear, and people have been hoping that will happen forever. And it's still a very, very secure way of being able to process transactions. And the banks are seriously looking at blockchain as an option. I think that the options that they've looked at were kind of expensive. So to manage a customer account via blockchain was sort of prohibitive. But I think that innovation around that space will enable that to happen. But I think mainframe will be around a lot longer. They're trying to bring in new talent into the mainframe. Anyway.
Do you agree, Patrick, that the mainframe will be still around for big banks?
Yeah, so I actually, before joining N26, I was also a consultant. So I also worked for a number of UK banks. And I suspect actually it's also very difficult to move legacy away from that sort of space, particularly when it's critical parts of that system. So I think for traditional banks, it'll be very difficult to move away from that. I think there's always that risk that companies have to take of sort of saying we're going to decommission a system and then actually understand how to migrate successfully without impacting customers. And that's a real challenge for existing banks. But yeah, so I do expect probably for traditional banks it'll still stay around. It's going to be harder to get the talent in. But it's not really a problem that we have to worry about at N26.
Helen, they mentioned blockchain, so you're an expert on this. Chainium wants to reform the global equity market. You say on your website it's unfair, it's outdated and inefficient, and you want to build it up from scratch with blockchain technology. Maybe you can describe very quickly how you do it.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I guess I'm a bit of an anomaly on this panel in that I don't work in banking. I work in the equity market, and for the last kind of 15 or so years, I've worked for some of the biggest global businesses in the equity market. I've worked for the world's largest share registrar and in the wealth management sector as well. So we're using blockchain because we believe at the moment, having worked in these areas, having worked on these systems, it's just so complicated, and you have all of these middlemen everywhere. So when you buy a share on the stock exchange, you have to go through a multitude of people, all of whom are storing different databases, collecting and referencing that share ownership. So you might go through a bank or a broker, you have a share registrar who's logging the ownership, you then have clearing houses, settlement groups. You know, you have all of these different people, all of whom are owning their own databases because they don't trust each other in terms of being able to have clear ownership. What we're doing with blockchain, and what we wouldn't have been able to do without blockchain, is directly connect businesses to investors directly. And what we're really passionate about is democratizing the equity market. So we are focusing on private businesses, so not the public businesses who have access to all the global stock exchanges, but private businesses, SMEs, startups, and directly connecting them to everyday investors. And blockchain allows us to do that.
I hear a lot of companies nowadays saying, we are doing something with blockchain, and sometimes I think, couldn't you just use a database for that? Database, because you're doing hotel reservations through the blockchain. Why? So how much hype is in this technology, and what is it really useful for?
There's loads of hype, right? And there's loads of scams. And I think blockchain and cryptocurrency in general are getting a bad reputation for that reason. But in our business model, we wouldn't have been able to do this without blockchain. There are so many people that need to have a view of share ownership. It needs to be legally reported, that blockchain in this use case is spot on and perfect. And it's an example of technology catching up and enabling us to disrupt the way that we've been doing things for the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah, we're looking forward to see that. Piyush, you're working at Spotcap, and you're active in a space which is, in Germany at least, where I come from, not known for being very innovative. The small and mid-sized enterprises. How do you see Europe's SME? How innovative are they? How tech-savvy are they?
Actually, I'd argue that the problem is not the SMEs, but the lack of innovation in this space. So, well, we are not in Germany itself, but we have seen in the markets that we are in, once you show them the possibilities, they get it. And once they get it, they want more. So that's why I think it's all about providing innovation in the market and then see the SMEs catch along and want more. So we are pretty excited about this.
So maybe you can describe in a few words what you're actually doing with Spotcap?
Sure. So Spotcap actually is a lender to small and medium enterprises in 5 markets around the globe. And recently what we have also done is we have also pitched our lending as a service to banks. So instead of just looking at disrupting, we also want to collaborate. And I'm very excited, actually it's a very big coincidence that one of our first enterprise customers is actually an Austrian bank, actually in Vienna. So yeah, that's what. So we have taken whatever we have learned in the 5 different markets that we are in, and you need to see that sometimes the markets are a bit different, you know, so that's why it needs a lot of tailoring, let's put it like this. That's why we have opened ourselves up to select enterprise customers, and we're very excited about this one. So lending as a service, check it out.
So much for the for the advertorial. So if I got this correct, this side is more of the disruption side, maybe, and this is more of the banking side. This is maybe the big question on innovation in fintech. Will it be dominated by new players like N26 and Spotcap and Chainium, or will there still be the big banks like Deutsche and Bank Austria and JP Morgan and so on?
Let me take this one, because I think my message didn't come across correctly. So for me, it was more important. It's not only about disruption. We're not trying to only disrupt. We are also trying to collaborate. And that's what I wanted to say, is we have seen that in the end, you need an empowered consumer, right? I mean, that's what we are all looking for. Someone who has a lot of financial literacy, has access to good services and products. And that's why we have decided it's not only about us just going and say we are going to be the only player globally. So we are really looking for collaborating with banks. And as I said, one is already is going to be soon out. I mean, this is all about listening to the banks, because, for example, what BAWAG wanted was they wanted to have a small business service product targeted to them, and then they say, can we do it? They decided, all right, so let's go ahead and see if we can do it internally. They decided to look at the alternative financial markets players, and then decided after extensive review that maybe in this case it's better to just get people who are already in there and know the market and can deliver this thing, given all the legacy that we are just talking about. And also about, I mean, we need to get this right? Banks are huge. They have a huge regulatory burden. They have legacy systems, so they cannot move as fast as they would love to. And while collaborating with them, we have also realized that it's about patience. It's not a walk in the park, but it's about patience and learning from each other. We need to be very smart there, because we need to really tailor ourselves to banks and collaborate with them. And we are really looking forward to this.
Yeah, could I jump in there as well?
Of course.
Sorry. So I've worked in big businesses and startups, and there's pros and cons to both, right? So big businesses struggle with innovation because you're tied with legacy systems and you've got the fear of cannibalization, whereas startups, it's really easy to innovate. Whereas big businesses have scale of clients, of money, of cash, of offices, or whatever it might be, whereas startups don't. So I believe you really need to collaborate, and the innovation, I believe, needs to come from startups, but then it needs to be launched through the big business scale that they have.
But Patrick, you don't collaborate with any big banks as far as I know, and you have a lot of investments, so you have cash on yourself.
Yeah.
So you're more really on the disrupting side then.
Yeah, but I also think that traditional banks have a place with disrupting as well. I think there's a different space. One of our values is really about simplicity and making banking services really accessible for everyone who's a sort of mobile generation. But I think the advantage that a lot of other banks have, which is not our focus, is really the physical presence. And there's really a lot of places where I think there are some banks that are also trying to disrupt the sort of customer experience when you walk into a branch, of being more friendly and having that more personal contact, which in a digital age is also just as important. So I think there's lots of places for sort of disruption. We're very much focused on digital disruption, of really trying to bring in the digital first thinking. And a really good example of this is we did an implementation of 3D MasterCard Secure, which is just a push to your phone. If you've ever been through this with online shopping, you normally get this like terrible pop-up, which is like, please enter a password, the 4th, 6th, and 8th letter of things that everyone sort of drops out, and we really focus on the simplicity. And so I think there's actually a place for both of these things in disruption.
What can't be underestimated is how lazy people are, or not lazy, but how hooked to their bank people are. And you sort of, I interviewed lots of people around, you know, why did you choose the bank that you chose, and how are you using, you know, the new digital banks and things like that. And they're not giving up their core bank. You know, they like the fact that their bank has that liquidity. You know, the bank that I work with made twice the profit of Apple last year. And, you know, consumer banking is just one small part of what they do. And then there's a massive infrastructure of, you know, global wealth management and commercial you know, banking as well. And I think that that's when we talk about innovation in banking, it's not just consumer banking that I think is interesting. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot recently is that, and reading a lot about as well, is that you know, lots of other industries like insurance and estate agencies and things like that have had this like platform revolution, and the banks have dodged the bullet for a long time, and it's only really the last 18 months that they are at the point now where they're about to be disrupted by a sort of digital revolution, both in consumer and commercial banking. The stuff that Helen's doing, I mean, that's fantastic that we're able to make, you know, investment banking available to Joe Bloggs on the street that doesn't have a huge amount of confidence in financial markets and things like that.
Is it the heavy regulation which spared the financial industry from disruption so far?
There was nobody allowed in. I mean, if you think about the licenses that have been granted recently, I think it was something like 130 banking licenses have been issued, and to that point, no banking license had been issued for something like 50 years or something like that. So, you know, there's been e-money companies that have been able to set up. There've been loan companies and things like that, but banks, you know, sort of banking licenses haven't been granted. Open banking sort of really changes everybody's world. It means that you don't need to have a commercial relationship with the bank to be able to leverage the data and to create new business models that you know, allow customers to do interesting things.
I'm pretty happy with my bank so far, but when I compare the app from this bank to other apps I have on my phone, it feels really like an old legacy.
I lost my phone and my wallet, which had all my cards in it, and so I have my core banking you know, card, and then I had the new digital disruptor type one. And, you know, it was an end-to-end journey. It was like the way the card turned up in this nice little packet. And, you know, instead of, so my core bank sent me this card attached to this letter saying, please go to this massive URL and click activate now. And the digital one was just like, has your card arrived? Yes. It was expecting that to happen. It knew what was gonna happen, which was great. But the novelty dropped off for me a little bit, because then my bank updated my app, and it was as good as the one that I was transferring funds to. So it's tough when you're trying to win customers. It's expensive to try and break those markets.
I mean, if I may comment on two things which go hand in hand with the fintechs and the collaboration, and why fintechs are still extremely important for banks and why we would like to leverage on is basically two facts which also explain a bit maybe why the old-fashioned banking is still present here. We were trying to run, and I think that Austria is not the only country where you see traditional banks running for two channels in parallel, being still very physically present, because we know that our customers appreciate coming to the branch, they know their relationship manager, they talk about their kids and how they're doing. So there is still this emotional part of being physically connected to your banker, which we would like to keep also in the future. So we are not running from the fact that still our customers do appreciate a physical contact. And on the other hand, we were trying to rush for a very fast evolution in digital channels. And rushing in two-speed train, definitely there is a way to go when it comes to digital innovation. And for that reason, I'm saying fintechs make also a very important step of our journey to making this more digital and more customer-friendly, like we are comparing also with other apps.
When the bank realized, when open banking was going to happen and they had to open up their data, and after they'd sort of panicked and worried and stressed about it, I think the banks, definitely the bank that I work with is really excited about the possibilities. They're looking forward to seeing what the fintechs do with that data and how they create interesting business models to leverage the bank's customers and things like that.
Don't want to mention which bank it is, I guess, but it's one of the biggest.
It's one of the biggest
in the world.
Yeah.
By the way, if you have any questions to anyone here on the stage, use Slido. We take questions at the end of the panel. I guess you all know what is Slido and how you use it because you used it before. We spoke about regulation, Patrick, and N26 has actually a banking license. So how complicated was it to get this?
Yeah, so we have a German banking license, and I think Germany also has very strict banking regulations compared to other European countries. So I don't think it was an easy task for our company to go through the processes of that. But I think this is another side of the innovation that we're talking about that you don't really talk about so much from a consumer point of view, is that regulation is there for people's safety. It has sensible controls. I think what we're really trying to innovate around is how we implement these in very modern practices. So as an example, we have a very rigorous continuous delivery pipeline with a lot of automated checks that give us a lot of safety, and that enables us to deploy more than 100 times a week into production in a very controlled and rigorous manner. We have sort of infrastructure under source control, and when we walk through audits, actually a lot of them don't really understand what all of the source control sort of infrastructure as code is, and we have to explain to them about how all of this is very much 4I principled in the heart of regulations, and we're really trying to modernize the way that regulations are actually implemented, and that gives us a lot of sort of security and control. So I think from our side, the regulations are, I think it's the difficulty of trying to understand not just what auditors say is that you need to do these processes, but really understand the intent behind it, and also try to innovate around how we implement them and make sure that we still maintain the control, but we think about how do we actually innovate how we implement it.
Do you think it's fair, the German regulation on fintechs or on banks? Do you think it should be maybe not so strict?
No, I think actually it makes a lot of sense. So I think the way that I look at it is that it's very much like software development, is that, when you find an error in production, you put it in a control to sort of make sure it doesn't happen again. So I think a lot of the regulations are there with good intent. It's often really the implementation. So as I said, it's like when people come around and say you need to have this checklist and this paperwork, the intent isn't really about the paperwork and getting through the audit process, but really about making sure that you have some security, that you have some tests and control and checks and balances. And I think for me, I think this is the real interesting side, that we have sort of discussions with regulators about how do we implement these in modern ways. And that's really exciting for me as a technologist, of really trying to challenge, we don't have to do with lots of paperwork and lots of people, but we actually think about ways that we can automate and put these checks and controls in a very new way. So I actually think it's helpful. I think it is obviously more work. But I think there's a sort of mystery around sort of agile software development where people think there's no process, but actually it's a good template and starting point to think about all the things you really want to have to make sure that you have security and stability and good processes in place.
But if you sit down with the regulators and you, I just guess that you are, for example, telling them that you are using cloud computing and why you're using it, I guess, but I think you're using cloud computing?
We do.
Yeah, and so what do the regulators say? Do they understand that cloud computing can be as safe as hosting your own services?
Yeah, so we also have to take some of our regulators and auditors on the same journey of trying to explain what this means and where the data sits and how we control that. So as an example, we had an auditor come in quite recently and they were a bit like puzzled because they actually said we had to challenge ourselves to understand what questions we needed to ask given this new place. So obviously if you don't have a physical data center, then it's less about like show me the machines and the layout of your network. And actually, we would walk through our sort of source control repository about how our network zones are automated and virtually constructed. And that's a very different question that we also have to help our auditors understand. But what I've really enjoyed about the process is that a lot of the auditors are actually very open-minded about this. Is that it is, once again, it's about the intent behind it, around, you know, we don't want to have services completely open to the internet. We want to have them hardened and restricted to, you know, minimum sort of risk vectors, and then that just gets implemented in a different way. So yeah, I've had really good experiences with that sort of process.
Helen and Hannah, Hannah and Tina, are also big banks going to the cloud, or are you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cloud, SaaS-based solutions are top of mind, digital first, sort of mobile first, having as much on the cloud as possible is because it means, I mean, especially if you've got a bank that's a global bank and you have to roll out you know, the software across 70 different countries and things like that, having a SaaS platform just changes everything. And also, you know, if you want to do upgrades, lots of, you know, so part of the problem, you know, I was saying earlier about having this car with an old sort of guts and a modern exterior, you know, if you want to be able to have that sort of supercar, then SaaS is your only option, because otherwise you end up on old versions of software. You know, you don't want to upgrade because it's kind of, you know, risky and things like that. Whereas lots of technology companies are now sort of going to subscription models and things like that, and are sort of not offering on-prem solutions anymore because of that problem. So, you know, it's not in anybody's interest from a tech perspective to have customers on old versions of your software.
What about Bank Austria?
May I just interrupt here? I think it's very, very important to know that cloud computing is one of the parts, is one of the pillars of our innovation, like Pat said. Just imagine, there was a time and place here where you had like Excel sheets of servers that were like, had to be kind of planned for months ahead. And if your team was kind of very quick at delivering something, and then you suddenly found you are ready, but the infrastructure is in place. And this is a game changer, and the banks need to get there. And of course, cloud computing itself has come a long way. I still remember AWS in 2006, 2007. At that time, wasn't, let's put it like this, they had a few features that they were missing. But nowadays, the cloud computing, especially Google, AWS, and of course, Microsoft Azure, they have caught up quite a lot, and they are solid platforms to deliver value very quickly to the end customer, and that is what they're looking for, right?
Basically, what I wanted to comment, I mean, as any other now extreme development when it comes to innovation and disruption, there are also steps which are taking in the direction of the cloud computing. But one thing which I want to take really and underline is what Patrick was mentioning. What for banks which are heavily regulated, and as everybody knows, is important to grow together with the auditors, with the regulators in understanding what the new technologies are and how to make sure what we are stepping into together, and we understand what are the risks that could occur, and we are putting all the mitigation actions in place before we are sure to give this type of security to our customers. So being responsible for a very high customer base gives also a different type of security you need to provide. For that reason, I'm underlining once again the importance of growing together in the direction of new technologies jointly with the regulators or with internal auditors, for sure.
Before we come to the questions from the audience, I wanted to ask one last thing about something that scares a lot of people right now. It's the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation from the EU. Yeah, maybe Hannah, how scared are banks right now?
So, I mean, that sort of, was it 3% or something of revenue is the sort of potential fines?
Yeah.
They are worried because it has huge financial impacts. But the other thing, I'm on a bit of a mission to abolish passwords anyway, and I think that anybody that implements username and password as an authentication method in their applications should be like, it's not, you're putting your customers at risk, you're putting your business at risk, and whilst it might be cheap to implement at the front end, it costs you money at the back end when you've got to secure all those usernames, passwords and things like that. There are other options, behavioral authentication, profiling the device and being able to use that data to be very sort of accurate about the consumer, and then offering something nice like Touch ID or something like that then is the sort of last step so the customer's comfortable that and CA have lots of alternatives to username password authentication. So I think GDPR, I think that the way that they're approaching it is kind of crazy in a way because, like all big organizations, they try to just mitigate liability, so they make it all about contracts. And I think that's a shame because if you implemented the technology, you can avoid the problem. And I think that we'll see some big fines, and I think that there'll be some serious investment. But it's a bit like, drink driving. No fines have taken place yet. They don't really know what the regulators are going to impose, and so we'll see.
Helen, maybe one voice from the startup perspective on this.
Yeah, I think, just a quick note on regulation. I mean, we're a startup, and pretty much it's the first thing that anyone ever says to us is, oh my God, what about regulation? And this is from everyday people who have not worked in financial services. So I think there's such a fear about regulation. And really, I believe, if you design something that's focused on what's right for the customers, then the regulation should not be the issue, right? And you should not start with the regulation, you should start with the customer. So just want to say that point. I think in terms of GDPR, it is a big challenge for all of us. We are blessed with the fact that we're starting a technology from scratch. So we've got the advantage of not having to deal with legacy systems and updating them. So that gives us an advantage over the established businesses.
So we have 10 minutes left roundabout. So we're coming to the questions from the audience. And the first one is for you, Tina. I guess you're very happy to answer this one. Are you afraid of startups like N26?
Afraid? Not. I mean, Patrick looks as a very cooperative guy, therefore I still count that this cooperation will bring just good benefits. No, but joke aside, what I would say when it comes to new participants entering into this market, on one hand, it's scary to understand that there are no boundaries anymore between industries, because I mean, I don't want to do the marketing for anybody, but think about Amazon, whatever they are offering, can you draw the boundary? What is their industry exactly now? So what for us as a bank, these type of changes mean is that there is a healthy competition which gives you a different sense of the speed, different sense of the solution, and the different sense of the target that you should reach in order to serve your customers. And underlining basically what we all need to keep in mind is what are finally the customer needs, because we were facing the fact that disruptions were not that easily accepted by the high population of the customers. So I would say once again, afraid not. I think that this type of new players entering into market gives a healthy competition that can support us to grow faster with a better solution and potentially cooperating.
Patrick, very quick, should Tina be afraid?
Well, we obviously would like to grow our market, but I think the market is big enough for lots of different players to specialize, and I think that's the thing, is that we have a very clear focus on who our users are, and we put a lot of user experience and focus into research around that, and I think it's big enough that you'll have a market with lots of different players.
I see, you don't want to get into a fight, both of you, that's okay. So the next one is maybe for everybody, I guess. How do you see the future of Robo-advisors? Maybe Helen, because you on the equity
Yeah,
market?
absolutely. I think you know we're really passionate about democratizing the equity market. At the moment, it is really focused on big public businesses who have access to the stock exchanges, and then wealthy, high net worth, accredited investors, and all the labels you have, where really the industry is really priced out the everyday person, the person who just wants to invest £10 here and there, right? So I think, you know, with the best of intentions, the regulation has added loads of fees onto this market. And I worked in the wealth management space for kind of 8 years, and the regulations in the UK, like RDR, for instance, have just priced out advice from the everyday investor. So I'm a big believer in robo-advisors and really democratizing the access of everyday investors. And I think from our perspective, we're building a technology platform, and we're certainly focused on making it available to people who are not investment savvy, not tech savvy, and robo-advice and all the other facets that make that easy for businesses to raise capital by selling shares and for investors to buy and sell shares. Any automation and simplicity of that is really key. And don't get me wrong, you know, I've worked in the financial industry for 15, 20 years. You know, we're not cowboys that are going to cut out the important processes about warning people that investments can go up and down, right? But there are ways that you can help people without adding on loads of very expensive advisors who are charging you phenomenal fees for expert advice.
Maybe one comment on robo-advisory just and when it comes to the future, what I firmly believe that there is a two-step approach that robo-advisors will take in trying to conquer the whole market. First of all is to be a first step towards the human advisor, to support, to give more information, to give more precise information, to support the conversation with the customer. And the second one is related to the direct interaction with the customer, which for sure also depends on the scale of the adoption from the customer perspective.
There's also a question about the UX UI, which frustrates users the most. This anonymous guy or girl is asking, at least, experience like we are in 1995. I can say that my banking app is kind of like 1995, but there are also other examples, like I think N26 is very famous for quite a modern UI, but maybe you all can add something to this question, why there's so much ignored in the space, a good UI and UX.
I can give a perspective. I guess for us, it's just a key sort of value from our founders of really trying to think about design thinking and really understanding how people manage finances, and then really investing and making sure that sort of integrates into the whole product development flow. We have the advantage, of course, of being a lot smaller, so we have this embedded in from the start of really trying to understand customers' needs, doing the customer research, doing sort of designs and prototypes and testing them out with the market, and then sort of flowing that into our iterative development process. And it's a skill and capability that's really hard to build up and to integrate when you have a really large organization. So I don't think it's not that people don't want to do this. I think it's just one of those things of it takes time to build up this capability, and then also it's a difficult thing to then integrate it with an existing sort of process.
Maybe, Hannah, you can also add something to this because you're working with banks. Is there something we don't see from the outside, that there is some legacy software in the background which doesn't allow to have
They're
a good...
They're always having to work around, you know, restrictions. It starts out what they would really love to do, and then sort of what's possible. It's interesting actually, because I see lots of reports from some of the, you know, the analysts, and they come in and they say, yeah, you could have this swimming pool, you know, like if you imagine it like a house, and they're like, yeah, you can have this big swimming pool, and you can have this, and you can have that, and they go, all right, okay, yeah, but what about the, all right, okay, maybe you can't have that, and maybe you have to think about that. And so they're always having to sort of amend and sort of compromise slightly on certain things. But the biggest challenge is not really the technical challenge, it's their customer base. It's sort of like, you know, when they're thinking about authentication, you know, or what about that little old lady who hasn't got that phone? Or what about this guy who doesn't have, you know, he works in the MOD underground and they don't have any signal, Wi-Fi, whatever. You know, their biggest biggest concern really is making sure that their customers like what they do, and they've got so many customers. For you, I mean, I guess it's simple because you've got digital customers that just, you know, will adopt what you've got and what you put out there, whereas the banks are always challenged by that customer base. But they are doing a good job, and they are getting much better at designing multiple customer journeys that please all of their customers within the restrictions that they have. They are breaking down barriers all the time. They, you know, using new technology that kind of orchestrates their legacy systems and sort of, you know, puts them in a different position.
You can tell that there are a lot of developers in the audience, because this very technical question got voted up, which is also very interesting. Which software you use for your core banking software? I know, maybe you start, Patrick.
So we have our own software. So, you know, coming from an engineering background, there's a difference, I think, between buy versus build. And I'm definitely of the opinion in today's age of, if it's something that's going to be a competitive advantage, you want to own this and not outsource this. So you'll always be hampered by slower development cycles. You won't be able to control quality when it's outsourced. And for us, we've built our own sort of core banking system through a whole bunch of sort of microservices and very modern engineering practices that allow us to do more than 100 deploys a week. And so that's the thing, is that that's very difficult to replicate. And that's one of the reasons we went for our own software.
Lots of,
Sorry, let me also add. We also decided to build ours. But the problem, of course, is when you want to integrate with existing banks with their own core banking systems that come from, I don't know, 60s, 70s, a lot of COBOL in there, a lot of mainframe. This is a barrier that then, if you want to like collaborate with a bank, then you need to figure out how exactly you can enable yourself to abstract away from your own core banking system, and then also enable a bank to try and come and meet in the middle. It's a big challenge with core banking system. So as part of this first bank cooperation that we've had challenges there, and I'm pretty sure we are on the way to master them. But it has also opened up another little path. That means once we have opened it up for one bank and the second bank, then our APIs become so flexible that we can take on any other core banking system that you can throw at us. It'll need a little bit of work at our end, but I'm pretty confident we can master that.
Yeah, the risk of you know, banks in, you know, sort of running their own processing, and the reason why they outsource it is because of the risk. And I worked with one of the processing partners for a number of years. They have something like 600,000 attempts to sort of penetrate their infrastructure on a daily basis. That costs them an absolute fortune. And you know, so that there's economies of scale in outsourcing that, so where the processor is having to invest in that security. What are your, you know, how do you keep that secure, and what, you know?
Yeah, so security for us is obviously very key, and we, you know, I think the thing that we invested in very early on is really a secure development lifecycle from the very beginning. So when we do kickoffs, we do things like threat modeling. We work in very cross-functional, agile sort of ways. So that means that we have security experts that work with development teams and products and services to design it with security in mind. But the other side is that, you know, in a book that I published about evolutionary architectures, we talk about fitness functions, so automated ways of testing for the quality of software that you care about. So we find ways of actually automating security in there as well. And then we have a multiple layer approach as well. So there's a lot of other services that we use for sort of network and physical protection from sort of outside attacks. And then we have other sort of security measures like more network zones, and then at the service level as well around typical hardening.
And what do you think of passwords?
Yeah, I think passwords can also disappear. I think it's still important in today's age, because I think, you know, I think there's an interesting thing about two-factor authentication, where if you use Face ID or touch, it's actually the same authentication mechanism. It's what you have, right? It's not really what you know. And I think that's something that passwords still actually have, but it's getting more and more of a challenge, because people reuse passwords. This is where password managers actually come in a lot more sense, because you really, best practice is to use a different password for every sort of new website, so that if one website leaks something, then so nobody's going to take over.
Thank you.
I'd like to just say one thing about the passwords.
One last
just one last comment. people should, we should also not underestimate, people are very used to passwords now. So it's whatever you are trying to disrupt the space with, needs to be just as convenient and still more secure than what it is. And that's where the problem lies. And I mean, we have experimented a bit in this space. Let's see, we are planning to roll out something pretty soon, so let's see how that goes.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you for your questions. Thank you, panelists. Goodbye.